Good day. You will be using tables and figures in your proposals and reports. And today I would like to discuss on how to label tables and figures and how to refer to these tables and figures in your writing. Here we have an example of a graph. First of all, I'm going to talk about the axis. Your axis needs to be labeled and it has to have units. So here you can see the x-axis label. The name of the x-axis is equilibrium concentration of methylene blue and the units are in ppms. On the y-axis, the name of your axis is amount absorbed and the units are milligrams of methylene blue per gram of coffee. So always your axis needs to be named and it have to have some units. In this graph, we have three sets of data, which is presented by the blue line, by the red line, and this black dots. So here on the right hand side, we have the legends, which tells you what each set of data is. So the black dots are your sodium-treated coffee experiment, the experimental data, and your blue line is Langmuir isotherm fit, and the red is your Friedrich isotherm fit. So normally the convention in science is when you have measured raw data, you use data points like this black dots over here. But when you are doing a mathematical fit, we typically then use lines to show that fit. Apart from the axis being labeled, the graph in its totality is also labeled, and that you can see down here. It's figure 9. And we also have a description what this graph means. So in this case, it's a Langmuir-Friedrich models fitted to the adsorption isotherm of sodium hydroxide treated coffee waste adsorbent. The label of the figure is put at the bottom, as shown in this example. Here is an example of a table, and you can see in the case of a table, we put a label at the top. So remember, figure, we put the label at the bottom, and a table, we put the label at the top. So in this case, the label is the table 2, and you also need to put a description there to indicate to the reader what are you showing in this table. So in this case, the table shows the absorption capacity of low-cost bio-waste adsorbents. So in the case of a graph, you have to label your x-axis and your y-axis. Now in the case of a table, you also need to label your columns or your rows, depending on the design of your table. So in this particular example, our columns are labeled. So the label of the first column is low-cost adsorbents, the label of the second column is dyes, and the label of the third column is absorption capacities. Once again, often you also need units. So the first two columns you don't need units, but in this case with the numbers, you need to add units. If you just look at numbers like this, numbers on its own without units are totally meaningless in science. In your proposal and your final report, you need to discuss the tables you've shown and also discuss the figures here are shown. Now here is an example on how to refer to those figures. So over here it says usage of 0.3 molar sodium hydroxide. You just put the figure reference in brackets, produce larger and smaller carbon dioxide nanocubes. So this is just one way of doing it. Let's look at another way. So over here we are talking about figure 4, and it says the FTIR spectra of the particles synthesized using these concentration of sodium hydroxides are shown in figure 4. Now in a proposal and a report, when you use figures and tables, you first talk about this table or figure and then you show it. So now look at this example marked in yellow. You can see we are talking about table 4 and 5. Now we're going to scroll down and there you see table 4 and table 5. So the message is you first discuss the table and then afterwards you show the tables. Once again, the tables are labeled at the top. Let's look at another example. Look at the part marked in yellow. It says figure 8 shows the following. And then after talking and discussing this figure, then we go down. Let's just go down, and there you see the figure. So once again, the axes are labeled. The axes have units, and the figure label is at the bottom of the figure. So you first discuss the figure, and afterwards you show the figure in your report.